Hi. Chapter 4, Florida Real Estate Sales Associate course. Chapter 4, all the important bits. Sorry, we can't have my hair looking less than perfect. Okay. Statutory law is enforced by criminal courts. Special agent. A special agent is authorized by the employer to perform a single act. General agent has a principal's authority to act for him or her on a continuing basis, but without authority limited to a specific trade or business. A real estate sales associate or broker associate is a general agent of his or her broker or owner-employer. Subagent. A subagency is not a type of agency as it is an extension of another agency. In other words, a subagent is a party who has been granted authority to act on behalf of another agent. A subagent has the same duties to the principal as the agent who was empowered by the principal. A real estate sales associate is a general agent of the broker and automatically becomes a subagent of the broker's principals. As an agent of the broker, a sales associate has the same duties to the broker's principal as does the broker. Transaction broker. A transaction broker is a broker who provides limited representation to a buyer, seller, or both in a real estate transaction, but does not represent either in a fiduciary capacity or a single agent. Fiduciary, the word means like trust, basically, I think, from my understanding. So the transaction broker equally represents the buyer and the seller. A customer is a member of the public who is or may be a buyer or seller of real property. The customer may or may not be represented by a real estate licensee in an authorized brokerage relationship. Nothing in Florida law states that a customer must be represented by a licensed real estate agent. Customers may represent themselves if they choose. A single agent. A single agent is a broker who represents as a fiduciary either the buyer or the seller, but not both in the same transaction. So their loyalty only lies with one. That's a single agent. So single one. Principal. A principal is the party with whom a real estate broker has entered into a single agent relationship. It's basically the employer. Consent to transition to transaction broker. To avoid an illegal dual agency, a broker cannot represent both the buyer and the seller as a single agent in the same transaction. This is the only brokerage relationship form that must be signed. Consent to transition to transaction broker. So if someone's a single agent, they're only representing one side, but then they want to represent both sides, they have to do a consent to transition to transaction broker. Because remember, transaction broker can be an agent representing both sides. A no brokerage relationship notice. This notice must be described and disclosed in writing before showing a property. A no brokerage relationship notice is someone who's being employed as a single agent. They have the responsibility and the duty to notify the other party that they are not representing, not their employer, of their no brokerage relationship. Authorized brokerage relationships. The role of a transaction broker is to provide limited representation to a buyer, a seller, or both in a real estate transaction. Limited representation allows a licensee to facilitate a real estate transaction by working with both the buyer and the seller equally. A transaction broker has a duty not to discuss price other than the price quoted in a listing, motivation, terms, or other information a party deems confidential which may harm that party's bargaining position. A transaction broker must speak and act in a way that maintains a careful balance between the parties to avoid any impression that a single agency has been created. Civil law allows a member of the public to assume the role of professional based on his or her words and actions, rather than the strength of any disclosure forms that may have been used or discussed. Single agent. An agency relationship is created when a broker accepts employment under single agency agreement. The single agency relationship must be disclosed in written agreement. In a single agency relationship, the employer becomes the principal who authorizes the broker as an agent to perform certain services on his or her behalf. The party the broker does not represent as an agent, and with whom the broker attempts to be successful in achieving the purpose of his or her employment with a principal, is the broker's customer. So there's the employer and the customer. A sales associate or broker associate is registered with the broker as his or her agent and is never an agent of the broker's principal, rather a sub-agent. A broker may represent a seller or a buyer, a landlord or a tenant. As an agent of the principal, the broker is obligated to attempt to obtain the best price and terms possible for the principal. If the broker represents the seller, the broker must obtain the highest price possible. If the broker represents a buyer, he or she must attempt to obtain the lowest price possible. Any attempt to represent both parties in a transaction would create an illegal dual agency. The single agency relationship is the only one that establishes a fiduciary relationship. The fiduciary relationship legally allows the seller or buyer as principal to place trust and confidence in the broker as his or her agent. An agent has fiduciary, remember that means trust, duties, I think, to his or her principal imposed by law. These duties are not a matter of contract or compensation. If an agent breaches fiduciary duties owed to his or her principal, the principal can bring civil action against the agent for damages. Such violation may also be seen as a criminal violation of Florida Statute 475 and bring an action by the state's attorney general. The licensee is also subject to potential disciplinary action by the FREC, Florida Real Estate Commission. Single agent notice. A form titled Single Agent Notice must be completed before or at the time of entering into a listing agreement, agreement for representation, or before showing a property, whichever occurs first. When incorporated into other documents, the required notice must be of the same size, type, or larger as other provisions of the document. It must be conspicuous in its placement so as to advise customers of the duties of a single agent, except that the first sentence of information must be printed in uppercase and bold type. No brokerage relationship. The duties a real estate licensee owes to a customer with whom the licensee has no brokerage relationship are as follows: dealing honestly and fairly, disclosing all known facts materially affecting the value of the residential property, which are not readily observable to the buyer, and accounting for all funds entrusted to the licensee. Presenting offers. A broker has a duty to transmit any and all offers to the employer, including oral offers or offers made without a binder deposit. Failure to present an offer may be considered concealment or breach of trust and could result in disciplinary action against the broker. Payment of commission. A sales associate or broker associate is required by law to perform real estate services under the direction and supervision of a broker or owner-employer. A sales associate or broker associate cannot contract with or collect commission directly from a member of the public. A sales associate that is not compensated as agreed by his or her employer may not file suit against anyone other than the employer. A broker earns a right to compensation by performance. Once the broker has performed, the employer owes a commission to the broker even if the employer fails to conclude the transaction. I'm going to repeat that because I didn't really understand it. A broker earns their right to compensation by performance. Once the broker has performed, the employer owes a commission to the broker, even if the employer fails to conclude the transaction. Interesting. We are almost done. Referral fees. A Florida broker may pay a referral fee. From the top. A Florida broker may pay a referral fee to or share a commission with a broker licensed or registered by another state or a foreign country. The out-of-state or foreign broker may accompany the customer to Florida, but may not participate in the transaction in any manner. If the out-of-state or foreign broker comes into Florida and provides real estate services in the transaction, no referral fee or commission can be paid. A Florida broker may not pay compensation fees or share a commission with unlicensed individuals in exchange for soliciting or referring business. Compensation includes gifts or reimbursement of expenses. The sharing of brokerage compensation by a licensee with a party to the transaction with full disclosure to all interested parties is not considered a violation of Chapter 475. I'm just going to read that last sentence again because I didn't understand it. The sharing of brokerage compensation by a licensee with a party to the transaction with full disclosure to all interested parties is not considered a violation of Chapter 475. I didn't really understand it, but we're just, I'm going to read it one more time. Why not? The sharing of brokerage compensation by a licensee with a party to the transaction. That's the thing that I'm not understanding. I guess they have a personal interest in the transaction with full disclosure to all interested parties is not considered a violation of Chapter 475. And there we have it. We are finished the pointers for Chapter 4.